Hi, and welcome back to U.S. History with me, Mr. Snyder, and today we are going to continue talking about our founding of the new nation with the Articles of Confederation and the ratification of the Constitution. So, what happens after the American Revolution? Well, each of the 13 states creates a republican form of government, which means there's a lot of different names for it: an indirect democracy, a democratic republic, a republican government. But what it means is that officials are representatives elected by the people. We elect people to go and represent us in the government. The states also write constitutions and pass bills of rights, which are lists of freedoms that are guaranteed by the government, and the government won't take them away, such as press, religion, trial by jury, stuff like that. For the most part, only white male property owners can still vote, even though we're all equal and everything. We fought a war together. Blacks, free or slave, cannot vote. Neither can women nor Native Americans. So the Articles of Confederation is our first constitution that the states collectively adopt. Most powers remain with the states in the Articles of Confederation. That's what Confederation means. It's what the Confederate States of America were fighting for during the Civil War. So most of the powers remain with the states. And it makes sense that they would want to do that, because they just fought a bloody revolution to get out from under the control of a government where all of the power rested with the central government. But there are some problems with the Articles of Confederation. I've got a nice little list here for you. Congress cannot collect or levy taxes. They cannot regulate interstate commerce and foreign trade. Each state has one vote in Congress, regardless of its size. So even though a lot more people live in Virginia than, say, Georgia, Georgia still has as much power that Virginia does, and Virginia didn't think that was fair, just for example. A 2/3 majority is required to pass laws, whereas now you only need 50%, it's just a simple majority. Articles can only be amended with consent of all the states. Now it's 3/4. You don't need all of them. There's no separate executive branch, which means we don't have a president under the Articles of Confederation. And there's also no system of federal courts to enforce federal law. So in the Articles of Confederation, one good thing that it did is it mediated states' conflicting claims to Western lands. The Land Ordinance of 1785 creates the Northwest Territory. So states along the original colonies would then just say, all the land to the west of that's our land, all the land to the west. But then their boundaries would run up against one another, and they would have conflicting claims to the western lands. So the Northwest Territory is how our state comes about. It does create rules for settling it in the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. They say once a territory reaches 60,000 people, they can then write a constitution and apply for statehood. Unfortunately, in this area and other areas to the west, a weak confederation that has no military and no ability to make a military means that we can't defend our interests on the frontier. So the Spanish see this, and they close the port of New Orleans. And the British refused to abandon forts that they said they would abandon on the U.S. side of the Great Lakes. And this is one of the things that leads to our American Revolution Part 2, which is the War of 1812, which we'll talk about next time. Here, if you ever wondered why over the north, if you fly over the Northwest Territory, current day Midwest, you see it's in squares. This is why, because we all have townships. Our counties have townships, which were then divided into sections and sold off to people. That's how we settled the Northwest Territory. So just kind of cool. Here's a look at Fort Wayne and which township you may live in. I won't tell you which township I live in, but I'm sure a lot of you live in Eel River, Washington, Perry, Cedar Creek. So a lot of different townships that we live in here in our district. Shays Rebellion is kind of the last straw for the Articles of Confederation. Basically, Massachusetts farmers whose farms had been foreclosed on start to rise up and take away because they don't think that foreclosing is fair. The government is supposed to protect your property, not take it away from you. So Daniel Shays, a local farmer in western Massachusetts, and his armed mob of thousands shut down courts so that their farms cannot be foreclosed on. They were going to go down and get a federal armory full of weapons and keep on marching, but Massachusetts troops had to suppress the rebellion. And it highlights the weakness of the federal government. So we kind of get together and go, okay, we got to do something about this. So the articles are broke. And in 1787, each state sends a delegate to Philadelphia for the Constitutional Convention. And two plans are favored at this convention. The New Jersey plan and the Virginia plan. New Jersey is a small state and Virginia is a large state. That's how you can remember which types of states liked each plan. In summary, the New Jersey plan was just to alter the articles so that they will work correctly. Let's give Congress the power to tax, trade, and still have a unicameral legislature and keep a loose confederation of states. The Virginia plan is basically, let's throw everything out and start all over. And the Virginia plan is put forth by James Madison from Virginia. They want a bicameral legislature, bi meaning two, so that there's two houses, and both houses would be based on population. So Virginia would have more representation than Georgia, so to speak. There would also be an executive that was elected by Congress. In short, we need to create a stronger national government. The Great Compromise, proposed by Roger Sherman of Connecticut, is what comes about. It's a compromise between the two plans, and it's what we have today. We do have a bicameral legislature in our Congress. One house is called the Senate, where all the states are equal and they have 2 votes per state. So we have 50 states, that's 100 votes. Each state has 2 senators. The House of Representatives is based on population. Indiana has 9 representatives in the House of Representatives. California has 53 because they have more population. Also, they decide to kind of just stall the issue of slavery, and the South wants their slaves to count as population because that would give them more power. The North says, no, you don't treat them like citizens, so why should they be considered people and be considered part of your population? And so they settle on 3/5. So each slave would count as 3/5 of a person toward a state's population. So 5 slaves would count as 3 whites. This gives the South much more power in the government, and it makes Northerners furious, laying the seeds for the Civil War about 80 years later. Here's a screenshot of what you can see. You see the Virginia plan on the left, the New Jersey plan in blue on the right. You can see we kept most of the Virginia plan. That's why we call James Madison the father of our Constitution, but you can see we do put the Senate in there. That part is from the New Jersey plan. So now we have to ratify the Constitution. That's what Article 7 in it is about. It's about ratification. Federalists, as they're known, are supporters of the Constitution. They want it to be passed. They want it to be the new law. The most famous Federalists are James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, John Jay. They write the Federalist Papers. And the Federalist Papers are long essays advocating ratification. Most of them say, okay, here's a problem that could come about in this new government, and here's why it's not going to happen. Here's why they won't abuse their power. It talks about things like checks and balances, separation of powers, things that are built in to prevent abuses of power. And the anti-federalists are the opponents of the Constitution. They think the Constitution has far too much power given to the national government. Patrick Henry and Sam Adams are the most ardent anti-federalists. Between 1787 and 1788, 11 of the 13 states ratify the Constitution, and it becomes law. And then finally, the last 2 also ratified as well. Now, anti-federalists, to get them to pass the Constitution, they are demanding individual rights that are protected from government interference, which would basically be like a Bill of Rights for the national Constitution. So the Federalists promised to add the Bill of Rights to get anti-federalist support for the Constitution. So between 1789 and 1791, states then ratify the Bill of Rights. So the Bill of Rights are the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. Here is what they are. I found this cute little graphic of it. So the first one, First Amendment, gives you the right to freedom of speech, religion, press, the right to assemble, and the right to petition the government. The right to bear arms is number 2. No quartering of soldiers is number 3. Number 4 is amendment against illegal search and seizure of property. Number 5 is rights of alleged criminals. 6 is as well. 7 is as well. 8 is no cruel and unusual punishment and no excessive bail. 9 is just because it's not in the Constitution doesn't mean that it's not a right of the people. And the 10 is the powers that are kept by the states or the people are the ones not in the Constitution, similar to 9. And then these principles, I mentioned a couple of them, but these are what was written about in the Federalist Papers, and these are the principles of the Constitution. So popular sovereignty is established in the first 3 words of the Constitution. We the people. The people are the source of the government's power. The government can only use the powers that the Constitution gives it. Separation of powers means our powers will be divided amongst 3 separate branches: legislative, executive, and judicial. Checks and balances means that each branch has the power to limit the other 2's actions. For example, the president can veto laws from Congress if he doesn't think that it's a good law for the land. Federalism means that state governments can do some things, federal governments can do some things, and then they both can do some things, like tax you. And citizens elect representatives to government to make the law. That's what representative government, Republican government, indirect democracy, that's democratic republic. It all means the same thing. So those are the principles of the Constitution. Okay, that's how we get to our current Constitution. Next time we're going to talk about it being tested with the War of 1812. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.